G'day mates, it's B-Buster here, and I would like to give Best Fiends a big shout out for sponsoring this episode. And you know, one of my favourite guilty pleasures is just kicking back and binging through a good Netflix series. The Last Kingdom was my latest one, and man was it good. But one thing I feel exactly zero guilt about is how much I enjoy playing Best Fiends. Best Fiends gives me an endless source of fun that I can access anytime right on my phone. It's a match 3 puzzle game like none other, with literally thousands of levels and new content added all the time. I've been playing for a while now, in fact, and I'm a little obsessed. Okay, well, maybe a lot obsessed, but I've really enjoyed some of the levels, the puzzles, especially some of the boss levels, and I've also been playing with my kids, which has been a lot of fun. We started a new game to get the basics down, and now that we've done that, my kids and I play most afternoons as a treat after homework. I think I've been playing it casually for like a little over a year now, and I'm also a little over 900 levels on my own game, and I'm still finding new elements. But starting again and playing with my kids has been a lot of fun too, and watching them become gamers, it brings a bit of a tear to my eye. And I think that's what I love about Best Fiends the most. It's a fantastic boredom quencher, it's great for casual gameplay in moments of downtime throughout the day, and I also love that more levels, events, challenges are always being added so the game never runs out of things to do. The game is also free to download, and with Best Fiends, there's something new today, and tomorrow, and even the day after that. So if you never get tired of solving puzzles, good news. With Best Fiends, the fun never ends. So, download Best Fiends free today on the Apple App Store or Google Play. That's friends without the R, Best Fiends. For some quick background, my uncle inherited a big old house after his father. And by old, I mean like 17th or 18th century house. He lives in an area where I can only imagine flats and new houses are extremely expensive. So instead of buying something new, he and his family adapted part of the house to modern living, installed some form of central heating, renovated it, etc. Most of the house, however, was closed off and never really used. They never needed this much space, it would just cost too much money to take care of that. It just wasn't worth it. My cousin, my uncle's daughter, is just 1 year younger than me, so although they lived quite far away from us, we used to visit them each holiday, just so that we could spend time together. And when we were about 12 or 13 years old enough to not cause much trouble, me and my cousin decided that it was about time to explore this house a bit. It was around that time that we became fascinated with horror movies and ghost stories. So, old house with unknown history, surrounded by even more abandoned buildings, was a perfect place to play in. But it was also around that time that we started noticing weird things happening around the house. Like, one time we would see her dog standing just behind a faraway gate. Her dog that passed away earlier that year, actually, shot by a careless hunter. No neighbour had a dog this big, I can assure you, and we would hear noises in a nearby park while going on a walk in the evening. It could have been animals, I suppose. Does and boars would come around that area often, but we never dared to check. Nearby warehouses for crops, Uncle works as a farmer, were closed in the evenings, but we could often hear loud banging to the door from the inside. We never really checked that either, but one day while trying to make a map of the house, we wandered to the attic and the door would open for us. A door leading to a room that was always closed off with a padlock, because the floor was too unstable to go in there. While we were walking towards it, the door just opened up dramatically, hitting a wall with a loud bang. There was nothing inside. There was no wind that day either that could have opened it like that. But at that, we ran away and told the story to my aunt. She went to the attic with us to check it, but she didn't take it seriously, nor did she believe us. Strangely too, the door when we got back was closed with a padlock on it. We were only gone for maybe a few minutes at most, so how that happened, we still have no idea. Despite all of these strange occurrences, though, we were never really scared of the house. Sure, dark hallway spooked us out, and we would always rush to the light switch, trying to fight the feeling of being watched, but that was about it. As time passed, we just got used to the fact that the house might attract weird things. In fact, we would sometimes joke around. It even dropped a hi every once in a while to a ghost from the attic while passing the staircase. It was just a part of living in that house with history, and we just sort of embraced it, I guess. It's not like we really saw anything scary, right? Well, the first and only thing that actually terrified me, until this day, happened a few years back. So my uncle and aunt threw this big family party in the house. My cousin and I were about 15 and 16 years old at that time, which was too young to be a part of the adult dinner table conversations, but old enough to take care of the younger kids. There were 5 of them, all boys, and to entertain them somehow, we came up with this game that we saw in... well, we saw it in The Conjuring. Yes, the horror movie. Like I said, we enjoyed this sort of stuff. In hindsight, it definitely wasn't the best idea, but if you haven't seen the movie, in this game you blindfold one person and the rest of the people hide somewhere around. The blindfolded person can ask other players to clap their hands and is supposed to find them following the sound. My cousin was the first one blindfolded. Kids scattered around trying to quickly come up with some nice hiding spot, and me, being way too old to hide properly, just walked until one of the ends of the T-shaped hallways and squatted behind the long table. Obviously, it wasn't a very sneaky place to be in, so when we first clapped hands, my cousin appeared from behind the corner and started carefully making her way towards me. The only source of light was behind her, so I couldn't really see any details, just her silhouette standing out from the background. I waited silently as my cousin bent over and walked under the table. There was sort of enough space to walk next to it, so I had no idea why she did it, but obviously the game was on, so I didn't say a word. I watched as she was getting closer and closer to me, basically crawling there, dragging both her dress and long hair at the floor, and I just wanted to laugh because I thought it looked really stupid. When she was really close, I even had this thought of reaching out my hand and touching her. That would really scare her, but in the end I decided that I wouldn't. I don't really remember what happened next too. I think one of the kids got bored and made some sound in another part of the hallway or something, so my cousin turned around and quickly disappeared behind the corner. Someone else got caught in that round, and then we changed the game. The party was coming to an end anyway, but my family was staying there a few days longer. We lived too far away to just come over for one afternoon, so we helped with the cleaning afterwards. My cousin and I were doing the dishes, and during the conversation she mentioned how the kids liked the games, etc. So obviously, I brought up the situation from the beginning. Without thinking much, I said something like, "Man, you look so stupid crawling under that table, you know." Or, "Why did you walk under the table like that?" And I could see how my cousin's facial expression changed, and she just seemed really confused. "What are you talking about?" she asked. At this point, I'm convinced that she's just trying to prank me, scare me, or something like that, so I'm not even worried. It is also an option that she just forgot that it actually happened in the first place. At the beginning of the game, I was hiding behind the table in the hallway, and you snuck under to catch me. I decided to remind her, but she was even more confused than before. "I never walked under any table," she replied. She sounded really genuine, and I could even hear the little bit of nervousness in her voice, but I still wanted to accuse her of pulling a prank on me. But then I noticed something. My cousin had her hair tied up the entire day. Her hair was long, yes, but in the hairstyle that she kept, there was just no way, like absolutely no way, that she would drag it on the floor like that. Which means that it wasn't her under that table. And there was no other long-haired girl in the house, in fact. I still have no idea what I saw back in that day. I'm not schizophrenic, was never diagnosed at least. My depression never gave me any hallucinations or anything. and it wasn't at its peak moment back then anyway. I wasn't on any meds, I didn't drink, I didn't take drugs. It wasn't a shadow that I interpreted wrong. I mean, I was looking at it for way too long, and it was just too close for me to think of it as a kind of mistake. I have to believe that it was real. I don't know who it was or what it was perhaps, but all I know is that I am so thankful that I didn't try to touch whatever it was. The history of the house is one huge mystery to me. I have no knowledge about who lived in it before or what happened there before my family moved in. I'm trying to investigate the matter, but even when I find answers to these questions, I'm afraid that it won't explain the girl-like silhouette that I saw in the hallway that day. I'm in my early 20s and female, and about 9 months after I had moved into my place, someone started pounding at my door a little past 11:30 p.m. I was already in bed by this point and was awfully concerned about this person at my door. My upstairs neighbour's aquarium had actually broken the night before, and it was flooding into my living room. Since I had had that fiasco with my neighbour late at night, I figured that it was probably just her again, and almost just opened the door without hesitation. But right before I opened it up, I had this horrible feeling just wash over me. So instead, I meekly said, "Hello?" through the door. I heard a man reply saying, "Hi, I'm a friend of David Jones." And the second that I heard him speak, my blood went cold. I had a terrible feeling about this. David Jones, obviously not his real name, was the name of the previous tenant, and he was a very elderly and disabled guy. He was in a wheelchair and lived with a helper, and he'd passed away before I had moved in. I looked at the peephole, and he was wearing sunglasses. Again, it was almost midnight, but then I noticed that he had a black face mask, a black hoodie with the hood up, and I said, "Sorry, but David doesn't live here anymore." He pounds his fist on my door again and laughs, saying, "Oh yeah? Open the door and prove it." Like I said, David was in a wheelchair and needed a ramp for the door, which was removed before I ever even moved in. I also drive a motorcycle, and my immediate neighbours don't drive any particular wheelchair-accessible vehicles. With all of this in mind, you would think that someone who feels comfortable enough with David to be knocking down his door in the middle of the night after at least almost a year of no communication would be able to evaluate the situation and see that there are no wheelchair modifications, apologize for the mix-up, and be on their merry way. Well, unfortunately, this wasn't the case. He was still pounding at the door and telling me to open up, and I told him that David wasn't here. I'm not opening the door, and he needs to leave now. He stood outside my place for a few more minutes. I was scared and stood there frozen by the door. Eventually, I saw him walk away, and I was still by my door when I heard someone rustling around by my back door over near where my bedroom is. I was still frozen. I didn't want to believe that someone could actually be by my bedroom window. For clarification, though, the area by my window, it's attached to a common area yard for all of the residents. It's directly off the sidewalk of a relatively busy area, so it isn't completely uncommon to have someone in the yard, but it is certainly uncommon to have someone directly up against your porch and the windows. I had heard something loud happen in my bedroom. I grabbed my pepper spray and cautiously approached the room. No one broke in, but something still seemed really off. After a while, I hadn't seen this person anywhere, so eventually I went back to bed. In the morning, I came out for a smoke, and I saw that my bedroom window screen had been ripped off. It was all bent out of shape and definitely didn't look like it just randomly fell off, and I knew exactly what had happened at that point. That guy ripped off the screen and tried to get in through the bedroom window. Thankfully, it was locked, and I have window jammers, so there was no way that he was going to get in. This obviously frightened me a lot, but there really wasn't much that I could do at this point. Anyway, a few weeks later, someone tried to open my front door in the middle of the day. No knocks, no nothing. I just heard my door clearly trying to be opened. I quickly shot up and ran to the peephole to see a man dressed all in black, hood up with black sunglasses on. He tried the door a couple more times and pushed against it really hard. I was trying to think of something intimidating to say or something to get him to stop. My brain decided that it was a great idea to just hit my door. And surprisingly, it worked though. So I slapped the back of my door really hard and the guy jumped up 3 feet and just ran away. Now, here is where I think things get just really bizarre. So I googled my address and everything online for my current residence still lists David Jones and the active resident, and I 100% think that that guy saw me, a young female, all alone, and googled my address and was trying to get my trust into opening this door. I think that after that didn't work, he was still trying to get in, and hence the bedroom window. Him coming back a few weeks later is very weird in my opinion. You would think that he would have either moved on to another target, or perhaps would have been much more interested in getting in sooner. I definitely don't think that he knew David. I don't think he owed him money or was family or anything like that. So the timeline is really strange, but maybe he already had other victims and just decided to try my place again. At any rate, his plan didn't work and he was gone. Literally, months go by, and then someone knocks gently at the door around 9 p.m. one night. I got up to look, and what do you know? An individual covered in black head to toe with sunglasses on. I didn't answer or make any noise. He slowly turns the door handle and pushes on the door again, then takes a few steps back and walks to my neighbor's door. I heard him try theirs. My neighbor is a middle-aged man living alone. The door didn't open, and I see him walk up the stairs and can hear him trying yet another neighbor's door. This apartment has 5 people living in it, including a child. That door didn't open, and he tried the remaining door that didn't currently have anyone living in it. Failure yet again. The whole situation was just really weird and creepy. So that makes me think that maybe he didn't single me out as a vulnerable female because he just seems to be trying to get into anywhere that he can, really. I do think that it's rather strange, though, that my cats hate this guy. I have never seen either of them hiss except for when this guy was at the door. They always are clearly very frightened and are ready to fight, which is majorly unlike either of them. You honestly wouldn't even know that they have teeth or claws unless you have a cardboard box or a laser pointer or something. They're just big sooks. But with this guy, they just completely change. Anyway, back in early January, our clad in black lad is back. My brother, who looks quite intimidating, was over for a visit. He heard someone try to open my door. He got up, opened the door to see this guy actively trying to open my middle-aged neighbor's door, and this guy just ran for his life. My brother wasn't aware that this was an ongoing issue at the time, and he just thought that it was weird, and he wasn't about to try and run after this guy. Today, though, I was taking a nap at around 2 p.m., and I hear an aggressive knock on my door. It pauses for a few moments and then picks back up. While this is happening, I heard my upstairs neighbors quickly close their windows. I was tired and figured that it was this same creep, so I didn't even bother looking. After a few minutes, I heard him knocking on my neighbor's door. After that failed, he went upstairs and knocked on the 2 doors up there for a bit. After a while, the knocking stopped, and I heard my upstairs neighbors open their windows back up. I couldn't sleep anymore, so I grabbed my smokes and I headed outside. I could hear my neighbors through their open window. The little girl was asking her mum who that guy was and why he keeps doing this. And I know of him bothering them at least twice, but it could definitely be more than that. I have reported this to my landlord, but she's absolutely no help and basically just tells me to not answer the door if I feel unsafe and to call the police if it escalates. The police don't have a quick enough response time to come out here when it's happening. I did call them before, and I don't have much of a description for them to go off of. And they basically told me to not open the door if I feel unsafe and to call them if it escalates. And I mean, you would think that someone ripping my bedroom screen off would count as escalating, but I don't know. I guess not. This guy, though, has been bothering me for a little over a year now, and apparently my neighbors as well. It seems really weird for a criminal to do something like this. Just keep trying to break into the same group of apartments over and over again. And I guess that I just have no idea what he could be after. This past year was mine and my boyfriend's 4-year anniversary. We typically don't do that much, so this year we decided to make it special by planning a romantic getaway. At the time, the two of us were living in Seattle and wanted to rent a cabin in a snowy small town for the weekend. We found a cabin in Airbnb with a hot tub, and so we were sold. The cabin was, of course, the last house on the road. To get to it, you had to drive down a sort of small removed private road that ended in a roundabout, and off the roundabout was a long uphill driveway leading up to our cabin. So we got to the cabin though, and it was snowy and beautiful. The cabin itself sat on top of a garage, and you needed to take the stairs on the back side of the property to get to the front door. When we got inside, there was a booklet with all of the cabin's info outlined. The book said that during the snowy season that we shouldn't be surprised if their contracted snowplowers showed up to clear off the driveway and whatnot. Okay, sounds good. We unpacked and we realized that there was no service on either of our phones, but the booklet told us that there was a landline in the cabin if we needed anything. We spent the first night by the fire playing board games and drinking wine, and that weekend was exactly what we needed. We planned to spend the next day in town, and that night I had booked us a reservation for a nice dinner. We were gone almost all day, only returning briefly to get dressed up to enjoy some good food and a nice night out. And dinner was great, and we were excited to head back to the cabin for some champagne and hot tubbing. While at dinner, the temperature had dropped and it snowed for the first time that day, coating everything in a fresh layer of powder. We drove down the private road and got to the driveway. At that point, my boyfriend stopped the car, headlights shining in front, and asked if I noticed the new tire tracks. I looked at the driveway, hoping to quickly disregard the new tire tracks, but there they were. Immediately, though, we remembered that the snowplowers could have stopped by. But the issue was, we saw the tire tracks because of the snow, and who plows in the dark anyway? We also knew that once we were at the cabin, we had no service on our cell phones or anything, so we figured that we would head back into town and message our Airbnb hosts and ask if them or one of their friends had stopped by to the apartments. We waited for a while in town for a reply from our hosts, but didn't hear back in the end. We could have called, but at that point it was past 10, and we didn't want to be bad guests. We figured that we blew the whole thing out of proportion anyway, and might as well head back to the cabin. After all, I am big into true crime, spooky subreddits, and horror movies, so I was probably just psyching myself out. My boyfriend drove us back though, and this time we actually drove up the driveway. But towards the top of the hill part of the driveway, I noticed something. My stomach dropped as I noticed footprints on the property. We backed down the driveway, and I took a closer look to see if there were more footprints. From what it looked like, someone had drove up the driveway, reversed down, parked, and then got out of the car and walked onto the property. Since we had now also driven on the tracks, though, we couldn't find where the footprints ended. The property was quite large, with tons of trees and brush, and we knew instantly that these footprints could really go anywhere. But the moment that we saw the footprints, we decided to call the police. We figured that it was better to be safe than sorry, and we would just have the officer go into the property with us to check everything out. So we drove down the road till we got service, called the police, and waited for their arrival. The policeman showed up, and we allowed him onto the property. The police officer scanned the property and determined that there was no one out there. Obviously, we're a little shaken up and pretty embarrassed, but we thanked the officer as he left. Needless to say, though, neither of us wanted to sit in the hot tub in the dark woods after what had happened. So instead, we locked the doors and we just watched a movie, champagneless. We were both tired from the day, and we passed out pretty quickly, though. At 3 a.m, we both wake up on the couch with the TV on and all the lights, laughing about how the night didn't turn out as planned. And as my boyfriend went to brush his teeth, we both heard a noise. It sounded mechanical and only lasted a few seconds. We looked at each other and froze, though. The garage door. There are very few reasons that someone would need to open the garage door of a guest-occupied Airbnb at 3 in the morning, mind you. And like I said, we woke up to all of our lights on and the cabin had lots of windows. We knew that if someone was outside, that they knew that we were there and they could even see us. So I immediately grabbed the landline and I dialed 911. We sat crouched in the Airbnb, praying for the police to arrive quickly. We knew that whoever had made those tracks was still on the property, and this time they were making noise. As I sat talking to the operator, we heard a bang on our balcony as if someone threw something up onto it. I was losing my mind when the operator told me that the police were nearby now. And all of a sudden, they were there. We saw the police lights and watched them search the property. Soon we heard banging on the door. It was the police, and we were okay. At the door were 2 policemen, one in front of us and one a little behind, kind of kicking around snow and looking at the ground. I immediately noticed the police officer in the back as the officer that did the initial check on the property. The police officer told us that not only was the garage door shut, but it was locked, and again, there were no signs of someone on the property. We discussed leaving, but the police officer said that the road conditions were just too dangerous that time of night. I looked at the police officer who had come out to the property twice, and I felt that I had deeply disappointed him. My boyfriend and I went back inside, though, again locking all the doors and trying to go to sleep. The next day, thankfully, we were leaving, and while we did survive the night, I just didn't feel right in the cabin anymore. It was forever claimed the spooky cabin in my head, and I just wanted to leave. But as we packed, we heard that same noise that we heard at 3 a.m., and it turned out that it was the heater, a heater that sounds just like a garage door trying to be opened. My boyfriend looked at me and immediately said, "You need to give up your murder shows," and just walked away, as if I'm going to. But I think back on this story a lot, and am embarrassed about how little came out of it, but I'm also incredibly grateful for the same reason. And although there are some explanations for some of the noises, where those tracks came from and why someone came up so late at night along our driveway, we both still admit that we don't have those answers. So in the middle of quarantine, only Mum can leave the house to buy us some food. And yesterday morning at around 9 a.m, Mum said that she's going to go and get some food for lunch, and she said that she might be back home late, and then she left. I was watching TV while eating breakfast, and maybe about 30 minutes later, I would say, I saw Mum enter the house empty-handed. I tried talking to her, but she just didn't respond. She just continued walking until she enters her own bedroom, and I ignored it because I think that she's just changing her clothes or something. But at around 11 a.m, Mum just arrived, carrying some meat and vegetables that she bought from the markets, and I was really confused because, well, I remember her coming home before. I explained to her what happened, and she also has no idea because she never came home earlier. I let her enter her bedroom to see if there was anybody inside, but she didn't see anyone. There was no one in her bedroom, and also her bedroom stayed the same as after she had left the house, so we're pretty sure that it wasn't some random thief or something. This left her confused, though, and she said that I was just having hallucinations, or maybe I should go see a psychiatrist or something, but I don't know. What do you guys think? So before I begin, I just want to clarify right now that I absolutely never led this kid on. Everyone who knew about it while it was happening will say the same as well. I'm not a flirty person by any means, and I was very careful not to say or do something to make this boy believe that I was into him. But anyway, so we're traveling back about 7 years, all the way back to when I was 14 years old. Makes me feel old as heck as well. I was at a high school sport event, and it was a Friday night game. I really can't remember if it was football or baseball, but all I know is that it was the last day of school before spring break. I wasn't super into school spirit. I was a bit of an emo kid, and a loner for the most part. But my best friend pressured me into going, and I reluctantly agreed, and looking back, man, do I wish that I didn't. I've known her since I was like 4, though, so if anyone can convince my stubborn ass to do something, then it's 100% her. But for the sake of anonymity, we'll call Stalker boy Zach and my guy friend Cody. So I had met Zach through my friend Cody. I probably spoke to him for like 3 minutes, honestly. It was more like an introduction, maybe, and I didn't really vibe with the way that he stared at me, so I went back to my all-girlfriends and we just continued the night. After I got home, I received a text from Cody saying that Zach thought that I was pretty and wanted my phone number, so he gave it to him. I didn't really think too much about it. I mean, it's not that I wanted him to have my phone number, but I was super close with Cody and he was reliable, so he would never give my number to someone if he thought something was off with them. But I wake up the next day on a Saturday and everything's fine. Towards the afternoon, I receive a text saying, "Hey, it's Zach. I got your number from Cody." So we did some small talk, basically. I didn't want to be a jerk, so I'd respond, mainly because he was friends with Cody, so I didn't want to be rude. After about 45 minutes of texting, he tells me that he's leaving for a cruise and was really upset that I wasn't coming with. So obviously I asked what he meant, and he said that he would miss me and hated to be away from me for a week. I definitely thought it was an extremely weird thing to say, but I figured that it was sarcasm or a joke, so I texted back saying something like, "LOL, we've spoken for less than an hour, I think you'll be just fine." And he was like, "Yeah, I guess." From my perspective, I had a lot going on in my life too. I was very anxious talking to people at the best of times. I was suffering from depression and daddy issues as well. I wasn't someone who could just be like, "You're weird, block number." I was a very shy kid and just didn't know what to do in this situation. So I'll admit that I let it go on longer than I probably should have, but I was 14 and didn't realize who I was dealing with, to be honest. But anyway, he's on the cruise, so I didn't hear from him for a week. Then eventually he gets off the boat and tells me that I'm the first person he wanted to text. He even said that he couldn't stop thinking about me and all the fun things that we would have been doing while on this trip. The rest is pretty fuzzy, but all I really remember is Zach kept saying weird stuff like how we'll get married in the future and how we're soulmates and how he's never been so in love with anyone, and he just became obsessed with me for some reason. If I didn't respond, he would text me every 5 minutes on the dot, asking if I was mad at him until I responded. It was just very obsessive behavior. I would tell him that I'm busy and he would get upset. He just needed to text me, like, constantly. One day, though, I basically told him that he was taking things too far and I was uncomfortable now. I said that I was sorry if I had somehow let him on, but I think of him just as a friend. He definitely didn't like that response by any means. He was making fake Instagrams to harass me, telling me that he's going to kill himself because I broke his heart, calling me a whore. My first kiss was at 18 and my first boyfriend at 19, so you do the math on whether I'm a whore or not. But he was just saying anything and everything to try and hurt me. I spent 6 hours apologizing while he was telling me that I'm a horrible person and I should just end it all. It was a really messed up conversation. And in the end, I just couldn't get Zach to leave me alone for like months. After that, though, my friends had to sneak me around campus to avoid Zach. I would have to cut through buildings and take the long way just to steer clear from him. Eventually, though, after a few months, he stopped harassing me online, and I actually thought that I was free. Now flash forward to sophomore year. After months of being in chemistry class, I noticed my friend, his name was Max, had the same last name as Zach. It's a pretty uncommon last name as well, so it was a bit like a light bulb turned on in my brain, and I immediately asked if they were related, and he rolled his eyes and said, "Oh yeah." And I was like, wow. We ended up chatting, and apparently I'm not the only girl that Zach would harass. Max told me that he got sent to another school and was put into therapy for basically being crazy and aggressive. Zach, unfortunately, was extremely abusive towards Max. I was relieved that he was sent away after hearing that. Max was definitely more relieved that he was sent away as well, and it also made a lot of sense as to why the harassment just stopped so suddenly. Now we're entering junior year though, and Max had informed me that his brother was enrolled back at our high school. Thankfully I had a heads up, but nothing would prepare me for when I actually saw him face to face. So I walk into English class, and guess who's sitting in my classroom? Yep, it's Zach. The second that we made eye contact too, he smiled the creepiest smile I've ever seen. I was quite honestly terrified as well. Thankfully he never spoke to me or harassed me, but he did spend every class just sort of staring at me with that scary grin on his face. And as much as I wish that I was making this up, unfortunately, these are all true events that really affected me in high school. When my friend brought it up the other day, it honestly felt like a fever dream, like I just forgot that it was real. It was really hard spending 2 whole years of high school terrified of bumping into him, not knowing what he would do, especially after finding out everything that his brother Max went through, which I won't go into detail, but man, it was horrible. Thankfully, though, it's been years since I've had to deal with him again, and for that, I guess I should count my lucky stars.